Welcome to Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. My name is Amber Ireland, and I'm here with my co-host, Jill Buccara. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Guided by Third Wheel. Today I want to do something, it feels a little different. I feel like maybe by the time we're done, it will kind of be on brand and on theme of stuff that we usually talk about. But I came to Amber today and I was like, I want to talk about Bridgerton. Which I don't want to just talk about Bridgerton, the show, but I imagine many people, even if you have not watched Bridgerton on Netflix, it's a Shonda Rhimes show. I think it's on its third or fourth season now, and it's like a period piece in England love story from the late 1700s, early 1800s, and it's about this family, the Bridgertons, and each season features a different one of them, right? Falling in love. And super popular all over the TikToks and the socials and stuff. So I was watching Bridgerton last weekend with my cousin. And long story short, and there is going to be some vague spoilers in here. So if you want to watch Bridgerton, maybe pause this episode for now. But long story short, I watched the first half of this episode or this season of Bridgerton, and I got really fucking irritated because I felt like it was just perpetuating this trope in so many rom-coms and Disney movies and fucking beach reads, this terrible trope of your soulmate man will treat you like shit forever until one day he will have a change of heart and love you. And this one was particularly irritating because the quote-unquote soulmate protagonist man, not only treated the girl like shit forever, right? And just friend-zoned her, but wanted her to be emotionally available to support him whenever he wanted, right? But was never there to support her. Not only did he do all that, she tried to draw some boundaries with him, right? And be he is not giving me what I want. I am looking for a partner. I am looking for a husband. And she found someone who was very nice and boundaried and shared what his expectations were. He was a whole ass human, right? And he's I too am looking for a partner, right? Here's what I can bring to the table. Here's what I can offer. They had nice conversation. There was a spark. It was all wonderful. And not only does the fuckboy treat her like shit for her whole life, he also comes back in the 11th hour and ruins this relationship. But then, of course, in Bridgerton, he ruins the relationship. This guy was about to propose. He doesn't because he's you're obviously in love with the fuckboy. And then her and the fuckboy make out in a carriage. And he's I love you. Will you marry me? And I was literally incensed because one, fuck the trope. And two, in real life, he would have ruined the engagement, made out with her in the carriage, and never fucking talked to her for 3 or 4 months. Ruin her life, and then continue to string her along. Right. And I was shame on you, Shonda Rhimes and Bridgerton, for perpetuating this bullshit about romantic relationships. So that is my rant. I leave that to you, Amber. I felt we could unpack that a little bit because I do think that these stupid-ass stories we hear over and over again really cloud the way that we show up in romantic relationships and our expectations for, partners and romance and chemistry and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. It, just plays into the story of, seeing somebody's potential opposed to what they're really going to do.
A fixer-upper partner.
Right. And we all have potential. Sure. We all have things that we're going to eventually grow into. And I think we know that innately about ourselves, so then we know that about other people. And so when we're in relationship with other people, we can just see there's just so much here, right? And I want to be around when you finally bloom into this person, or I want to help you, and I don't think there's anything wrong with cheering for other people, but also at that point it goes back kind of the people pleasing. you're giving up on yourself. You're giving up on like you actually growing, because all you're doing is pouring into someone else's potential, opposed to being like, you know what? You have that potential, and maybe one day, and I'm going to sit over here with myself and grow myself. And maybe you're thinking, I'm going to grow myself so that when one day you are whole, I will also be whole, and maybe we can meet up at a later date, right? But to sit here and not be whole because you're pouring into somebody else's potential, seeing them maybe reach that or reach what you think it should be, right? Them then recognizing you. Now you're like over here like half a person.
Yeah, because you've been so hyper fixated on them. And I think sometimes too, like when you believe in that like potential trope or fixer-upper kind of partner, like, yeah, you're so focused on that you're closing yourself off. It's like the tunnel vision, right? You're tunnel visioning, focusing on them, one, and you're not working on yourself, thinking about what you want, having, experiences and things like that. And two, you're closing yourself off to maybe potential partners and people that don't fit that stupid fairy tale romance narrative that we've been told.
Right.
Like, it was almost like Bridgerton, I don't want to say they were like mocking this other like love interest guy that she was into, right? But they're kind of like, he's a loser, right? Like there's no fire, there's no passion, because it was like, I mean, their conversations were like a little bit more like logistical in nature. Like, I guess it's like not hot and not cool for someone to be like, here are hobbies I like, here's like the schedule I have, right? They're like, what a loser, and it's like, is that not hot? Like, to me, maybe it's just me, but like, to me, that is hot, right? Like, for somebody to come up and be like, hey, here are the things I already have going on in my life, right? Here are the things that are really important to me, and here are the things that I'm looking for, and it seems like you might fit that bill. You and I might be looking for the same things. Our interests and activities feel compatible. Perhaps we should explore that.
Right.
And Bridgerton's like, lame, loser, like, where is the, longing gazes and anger and passion? And it's like, no, I think that we're like teaching people like the wrong thing is the good thing. Yeah.
We're teaching people to not walk that middle path, right? Like, you need to have high highs and low lows, right? And we're used to that. Most of us are used to that, just chaos, really. And that's what we're looking for. So when we find that high, we're like, yes, this must be it, right? Yes. And really life should be about like maybe a few high highs and a plateau. You shouldn't have to swing all the way back to the other place.
Yes.
I think too about relationships like that and like how they're played out like in movies, right? And then how they really play out in real life. Because I think in my own life, I've experienced like different types of relationships. And I definitely have experienced relationships where it's like immediate, like these high highs, this very passionate energy, where I didn't have that foundation of, hey, what do you like? What do you, what are you into?
Who are you as a human?
Right?
Yeah.
And just riding that wave.
Yes.
And riding those high highs and the low lows, because that's what happens. It's like you have the high highs and everything's really great. And then when everything's not really great, everything is shit. There's no like middle ground there because there's no foundation to stand on.
Right.
When life is kind of, what some people would call boring, but really it's stable.
Stable, yes. Like
you don't
stability,
have it.
Contentment, those types of words. Yeah.
And I think, and that's where, like, for me, as someone who is trying to stop people pleasing, what would happen then is, let me pour into this person and help build them up. I would not build myself up because I'm like, here is the goal. You being successful is the goal, right? And then they would get successful. And one of two things would happen. I would start to pull back because I'm like, it looks like you got it. I'm going to start working on myself, right? And they would look at me like, wait a minute. I don't need you anymore.
Right.
Right? Or they would get to a place and then they would look at me like, well, you don't meet my energy level.
Yeah.
And they would leave. Am I going to take responsibility for choices as to how people left? No. But I do have to take responsibility for the energy that I brought into that relationship.
That's true.
And the expectation that I fostered,
Right,
Right?
absolutely. And that precedent, and that just kind of like, I'll be here for you while you go off on your wild ass journeys, and you can ignore me for weeks, but the moment that you need, somebody to like pour into you emotionally or energetically or logistically or whatever, like here I am at the ready, right? And I think, we see that shit like, and what the books and the movies and the shows tell us is like eventually it all pays off, right? The guy notices or whoever notices like, oh my gosh, this person's been supporting me all along. Like I love them. When really the vast majority of the time, they will take all that energy, they will take all that emotional labor, because why wouldn't they? Because you're literally handing it to them on a silver platter.
Yeah.
And then they'll dip the fuck out.
Yeah.
And I think I get irritated clearly that we're just like acting like this like fairy tale romance is actually going to end that way.
Right.
Because I think, me personally, I see like friends and colleagues and other people, they like chase this bullshit because we've been almost like brainwashed into thinking we should. And we have like nice people who like are whole ass humans, right? Who are literally looking for nothing more than companionship, someone to spend time with, somebody to have fun with. And we are like, yawn, boring, all of that kind of stuff. And I just wish that we could celebrate like that kind of love more often, as opposed to like you said, the high highs and the low lows and the dramatic ending and the final showdown and all of that kind of stuff.
I mean, we just have a hard time doing it in general. I know I've had a hard time doing it in my life partially because what you see out in the world is like, when you scroll on Instagram or on Facebook or, watch TV or watch Bridgerton, you're constantly looking at these other relationships that appear to be fun and passionate and all these things all the damn time.
Yes.
First off, if I sit back and I think about it, I don't know that I want that. That feels exhausting, right? And also, I like being in a relationship with other people. I never want to be so enmeshed that I don't have my own identity.
Yes.
And that they don't have their own identity. That's even, I think a lot of people will say, like, I want to have my own identity when I'm in relation with other people, right?
Sure.
And I think it's common. And that's sometimes why things don't work out, because people are like, oh, this person is selfish or whatever. But I think the piece is that if I don't honor that I want you to have that too, then what I could be saying is I want my own time and I want all of yours.
Yes. And I think that comes from, are you a whole person? Are you secure enough to let someone else be a whole person?
Right.
Because I think, to me, sometimes that feels scary. Because if you're a whole person and you don't need me, again, going back to the people pleasing, then you could leave at any time and be fine.
Right.
But if you're a shell of a human, if you're a half of a person, if I
know how to do that.
If I engage in this, codependent merry-go-round with you, you're a fucking train wreck. And the chances of you leaving, in my mind, are lower.
Right.
And I think that's what you have to get to. And that was literally what it was in Bridgerton, is this was like a whole ass man, this other guy. He's like, and I have a life, and I have a house, and I have hobbies, and I have a routine, and I'm cool, right? Like, overall, I'm fine. I'm happy doing what I'm doing, but I would be interested in sharing this with somebody.
Right.
And, and that does feel scary, because you're telling me I'm fine without you, right? But I think, to your point, the best relationships are going to be, you're going to be able to achieve that middle path, achieve that contentment when you have two whole people consciously choosing every day.
Right.
I want to share, what I've built and what we've built together.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, as you were saying that, I was thinking this. You're not in that relationship yet, right? And you've realized that, like, maybe the relationships you've been in up until this point have looked like that, where it's like we're not showing up as two whole people. No. There's a lot of codependency. There's a lot of people pleasing. I do a lot to like bend myself into what someone else's needs might be. And now I start working on myself, right? I'm like, I'm going to take some responsibility for how I've shown up in these relationships. I'm going to do some work. I'm going to start to get real clear on what I want in another person and what I don't want. Like, what are the non-negotiables, right? I start thinking about, like, what a whole person would look like, what a relationship would look like there, right?
Sure.
So I start doing the work and I'm moving through it. And I find somebody because I've got my sights set on, like, I want, a healthy relationship, and I find somebody, right? Just like this girl did in Bridgerton, right? She was like, I'm doing the work. I'm done with this. I'm setting the boundary. I'm doing what I need to do. And I will say, more often than not, if you've got your back burner people, if you haven't completely shut those doors, and maybe sometimes even if you have, it's like you become this beacon, and they're like, oh, wait, there she is. There she is.
She's getting away.
Shit.
She's getting away.
She's very shiny. And they just show back up. And they do. And like for maybe a day, maybe a month, maybe, a few weeks, they show up in like their most perfect form.
Yes.
Because here's the thing.
Because they're matching your vibrations.
Right. And they're trying to. That's the thing. They're trying to, which is nice. Right? It's nice. Somebody, but they're not there yet. They didn't do the work that you did.
Do it. They're faking it right now.
Right. And so, don't just reopen the door. Like, they just see your light and they want some more of that.
I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
From women, from my friends, from people I mentor, that they're like exactly what you said. They've had probably like not the most healthy relationship in the past, right? Whether it's like an ex or something that was always kind of casual, but they wanted more, right? And they finally say, you know what? I'm done with this bullshit. And like exactly like you said, and then all of a sudden they have like either met somebody new, they're doing amazing, and here that fucker comes back again. And like you said, and it's like smoke and mirrors, and you think, oh man, and you want to believe because you believe in the trope, right? Because you believe in Shonda, because you believe in Bridgerton, because you believe in fucking rom-coms. You're like, I've been doing the work, he's been doing the work, and now this is like our most perfect. Right. This is our culmination. This is the last 2 minutes of the rom-com movie, and we'll live happily ever after. But no, 99 times out of 100, they just see that you're shiny. Yeah. And they're coming to vampire some more fucking energy from you. Right. And I think we have to remember that maybe it is that 1 in 100, and they've really been doing the work, but like explore that before you take everything good that you've done and thrown it away. Right. I have done that multiple times in my life because I believe the bullshit. Right. I believed the bullshit. I think if I would have watched Bridgerton 3 or 4 years ago, I would not have been as angry as I think I would have been like, ugh, true love prevails, like amazing. But now I'm like, dude, this is some fucking bullshit. Because I believe that he would come back. I do believe that because of what you just said. Yeah. But I don't believe that he would have done the work and was ready. Right. And of course he'll come back.
Well, and here's the thing. I don't want to like bash on folks who, do a comeback, but it's like maybe he did do the work, and like you said, it needs to be explored. Because here's what people say when they come back. I've just missed you so much, and I've thought about you every single day. And yes, I've talked to and dated other people, but nobody compares to you. Yes. Right? That's not doing the work. That's not doing the work. No. That's some weird longing. No. What did you do with yourself to recognize what you needed to be, how you needed to show up in this relationship? Not that you missed me. Of course you fucking missed me.
Of course, because I am objectively wonderful.
Right. But what did you do to make yourself wonderful to be in this relationship? And if you don't have any answer to that, if you're not like, I've really reflected on the fact that I treat people like shit, or I know why I do this now, and this is what I'm doing to rectify this, or I see this core wound and how I've been playing that out on other people, and I don't want to do it anymore. Unless you're coming at me with that, well, of course you miss me. But we're not going to do this. Just because you miss me doesn't mean that I need to show up for you anymore.
Just because you miss me, it doesn't mean you've done the work. And I think that, and it's like, how do we shift that definition of like hot, sexy, romantic from like passionate longing.
Right.
Like, that's not hot, sexy, or romantic.
Mm-mm.
Anybody can fucking like wish they were better and miss someone else.
Yeah.
Sure. No, what's like hot, sexy, and romantic is being exactly like what you said. I've done the work. What's hot, sexy, and romantic is like setting clear expectations and boundaries. Right. What's hot and romantic is being like, this is what I want for my life. I'm hopeful you do too, because you seem like a cool fucking person. But
Right.
if you don't, I am grounded in who I am.
Right.
That is what's hot and sexy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not like, oh, babe, I can't sleep at night because I miss you so much. Yeah. No,
like
take a fucking Ambien. Yeah. Get out of here.
I love that we both went to, like, I was going to say take a melatonin, but
take some drugs. Get out of here. That's what we need to start talking about more. Mm-hmm. Is like, man, I wish like 13-year-old Jill did not watch so many goddamn rom-coms and read so many stupid beach reads all the live long day. Right. Because perhaps I would have found other things attractive and other people attractive.
Right. But I wonder how this plays out on the other side. When these, like Bridgerton or any other rom-com that comes out, like what message does that send to the male of like what I'm allowed to do?
Yes.
And all I have to do is like just literally like show back up when plan A doesn't work out. I can just go to plan B and be like, oh, I missed you. Oh no, you missed me because you don't have someone else to focus on right now. Yes. Like that's...
Well, and I think I was having this conversation because I've been ranting about Bridgerton for about a week and a half at this point, and I had this conversation with a guy, and I was talking about the same thing, and I said, I wonder for men who are like whole ass humans, right, and who are sure about what they want and who are willing to have like honest, open, and vulnerable conversations. I wonder if it feels defeating sometimes watching women chase these fuckboys, right? I think the toxicity is on both sides, right?
Yes.
But I also think that these narrative stories, Disney movies, etc., kind of breed like toxic masculinity, right? Kind of romanticize avoidant attachment.
Right.
And does that put some undue pressure on men as well, right? And just, and that kind of piece, like, do I need to be more distant? Do I need to be more aloof? Do I need to play it cool because that's what girls think is hot?
Right.
So I think about that a lot, and I think there is some truth to that. We were talking right before we started doing this podcast about back burner people, and let me not sit here on my high horse, right? And act like I have never had back burner people in my life. I think many of us have had back burners, people that are good for the old boost to the self-esteem, right? People that when I'm feeling lonely and sad and, need some validation or some company, I know I can call on them, but what am I putting out in the world energetically when I do that? How low are my vibrations getting, right? When I'm using people to like fill a hole or a void that I'm unwilling to fill for myself.
Right. There's two different pieces here, right? There's like one where there is a knowing there. We get together at certain times. We hang out at certain times. There's no expectation that this is eventually going to turn into something else, right? Sure. That's very different than the back burner person that you go to and you're like, oh, I've missed you so much. I think about you all the time. Yes. And just like really gaslighting them, and making them believe that like they are the priority or always are the priority, even though you're not paying attention to them. Right.
Yeah, there is definitely some ways to be like honest. And again, coming back, I think the best thing that we can do in these like romantic, relationships is just like be honest about what our intentions are and about what we want. And if we don't know what we want, then we need to say, I don't really know what I want, right? Because then you're giving that person the opportunity to be like, I don't want to be with somebody that doesn't know what they want. Right. I know what I want and I'm ready for X. And if you're over here bebopping around, like, I don't know what I want. Like, okay, then I have the opportunity, like maybe I want to stick around and see if they figure it out, or maybe I want to keep it moving. Right. And I just think that honesty piece is so important, and I don't think we ever talk about that in these movies and these stories and things like that.
It is a good idea to have the conversation about like long-term expectations in a relationship and like what is it that you're looking for and what is it that I'm looking for, because I think it's easy sometimes, even if you feel like the relationship is healthy and all those things, but you never talk about like what do I want a year from now? What do I want 5 years from now? If you never talk about that, you could just be like rolling along and the other person wants something completely different than you do. And you get to that place and then you're like, well, I expected that these things were going to happen, but you never said it. And nothing's really wrong in the relationship except for the fact that you didn't communicate your expectation.
Right, exactly. And now all of a sudden you're at this weird impasse where like maybe you do really like each other. Maybe you are enjoying the time you're spending, but to what end? Right? Are you willing to compromise all the things that you want? For this?
There's sometimes that I think we create a story of what the relationship should look like, right?
Yeah.
And we're like, we date for this amount of time, we're engaged for this amount of time, we live together for this amount of time, like all of these pieces. And maybe you get into it and you realize, like, that's not as important to me as I thought it was.
Right.
Now that I have the relationship, now that the relationship feels stable and smooth. Like, those were external validations that the relationship was actually safe and stable. But now that I have real validation that they're safe and stable, those things aren't as important to me anymore. But always making sure that you're like rechecking in with yourself. Like, okay, well, if at 5 years I'm not married, is that a deal breaker? Mm-hmm. Right? Is it a deal? Because if it is a deal breaker, it's okay. Like, it's okay to be like, this is a deal breaker, but really explore why. Because I think sometimes for somebody that's been married and divorced twice now, these like boxes that society puts us in when we are married and those types of things. Really, I was just looking for some stability.
Right. You were looking for a stable, committed relationship.
Right.
And you're like, marriage equals that.
Right. And I think now I'm kind of at a place where I'm like, well, I mean, it doesn't equal that. Actually, it's very expensive to get out of that. It doesn't equal that. And so create that foundation on the front end.
Right.
If the other comes, it's just kind of like I don't even know if it's an added bonus. It's just, something extra, but it doesn't represent the stability.
Right. Because I think, like ask yourself, am I saying I want to get married by the time I'm 35 because I want to like legally be married to someone when I'm 35, or because I want like a stable, committed partner by the time I'm 35? Like really unpack that. Like, what am I looking for? Right. And then I think if you really drill down into that, then you're going to be able to have thoughtful conversations with the person you're thinking of partnering with, right? About it.
Right.
That I think we don't talk about enough or push enough or value enough is like these really like just hard but thoughtful and logistical conversations we have, you know, with the people we're choosing to spend our time with.
Right.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that is like literally like poo-pooed as like boring and stupid. And if you're having these types of conversations, then you're settling, right? Then that's not real love. Then like and it's just like, I don't know. I don't know about that. I just think when I think about the times that I have been like head over heels, like literally high as a fucking kite in love, there was no stability. There was no foundation. I mean, you could have like, could have and did knock our house of cards over with a fucking feather, right? Because you don't even want to have those conversations because you're just busy being high all the time, right? Like riding off of feelings and emotions. And I think that is often the kind of love and feelings that are celebrated instead of the more like thoughtful, intentional.
Right. And it's not to say that you're never going to have that with somebody that you have stability with. That's not true either. But it's like you can't sacrifice one for the other. You can't be like, because this is so passionate, I know that this is the right thing, even though I recognize that there's no stability here.
We don't need to have these hard conversations. We can ignore all these red flags.
Our love will
conquer all. And I think that's the thing we have to think about too. Like, again, I think in movies and books and everything else, there's like these beautiful stories of like two people who are totally, totally, totally different. Like different in lifestyle, different in values, different in family, different in everything, right? And they're like, love conquers all. And sometimes love conquers all. But I think those things need to be considered and they need to be talked about too. But that's the story of how I got real fucking amped during Bridgerton. And I told my cousin, we were watching it, I said, I'm going to ask Amber to do a podcast about this. Because we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
And we just need to say, like, let's turn some of these stories on their head. Like, let's celebrate, like, the butterflies and the excitement and the falling in love and all of those things that are, like, wonderful, right, about romantic love. And celebrate that and, like, snuggle into it, you know, when we have it. But I'm not going to get behind Colin Bridgerton. I'm not Team Colin this time around. I think he's being a fuckboy. And I don't feel good about it.
Yeah. I haven't watched this season. I have watched Bridgerton. I haven't watched this season yet.
Yeah, I'd be curious on your thoughts. So it's only the first half is out now.
Okay.
And then the second half comes out next week, I think. But yeah, so this is just about the first half. So maybe
maybe Shonda will redeem herself in the second half, because maybe she also realizes this and the second half comes out and
I mean, I hope old girl leaves his ass, but I don't think that's how the story ends.
It's like, guess what? Mistake was made.
Mistake. I did not mean to make out with you in that carriage, because you are not emotionally ready for the relationship that I'm ready for.
Right.
I don't think that will happen. I hope, you know.
Maybe.
I do. There's some Netflix movie, and now this is going to be a useless story because I don't remember what it is, but you think it's like a rom-com, right? It's like a girl in like her 20s, and she like lives in New York, right? And she like breaks up with her boyfriend, and she's like finding herself, right? And like going on all these, you know, dates, and like you think maybe she found like the one, right? But really the story ends, it's almost like a love story to her, right? Like where she finally again like learns how to be a whole ass person, and it ends not with her with somebody, but with her like being happy and content with like who she is and grounded in like, I'm not going to let people treat me this way. This is the type of thing that I'm looking for. And it ends that way. And I'm like, now that's a nice fucking story. Right? Because I think because she's there, she's going to find what she's looking for. But I think sometimes we have to remember that happy endings can look different, right?
Yeah.
And there is no destination in this life either. No. There is no, I say that all the time to people. There's no destination happiness, right? Like you don't just get there.
Right.
Like it's in constant unfolding. It's a constant becoming. And we have to remember that as well, because that is also not articulated in the stories, in the movies, and the shows that we see.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of those like rom-com, there has to be kind of like what we talked as a couple podcasts ago, where like something terrible has to happen in order for something good to happen.
Yes, like the leveling up.
This constant cycling about like, you know, something has to burn to the ground before something else comes around, you know, and it's just like, it doesn't really have to be that way. Like it is that way sometimes, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And we can always choose how things are going to go. We can choose how we're going to see it, what role we're going to play in situations. Like we're not just being dragged around. And I think that's another thing, as you were talking about that I was thinking of, you know, here she's done all this work and then like allows herself in essence to just be dragged around by this other person. Yes. Like he shows up and she's just like, well, let me get on the leash.
Right. Thanks. Like let me tie myself up. Let me tether myself to you. Yeah. Again.
Right. And it's
after you've done all this.
Right.
And I feel the frustration because I think I've been there.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where it's like, yeah.
You're going back and forth and you've done the work and you know the things. But I mean, the thing about it is being dragged around is familiar, you know, and it's like, but maybe this is the way it should be. I think you finally do get to a place where you're like, nah, I'm just not down to be dragged around anymore.
Yes. Yeah. It's not fun for me. I'm not having a nice time.
And I can see it. You know, I can see it a mile away when it's coming now, opposed to before where I'm like, ooh, let me do this again.
And I think that comes with the whole person thing. Like, I do think I've done a lot of work in these last several years to like make myself a whole ass person. Like I am not walking around like a big gaping open wound, like a half of a human looking for someone else to make me whole. Right. And I think when you feel like you need someone else to make you whole, you're willing to let people drag you around because then you're tethered to them, right? Goal achieved. But when you're a whole ass human, you're like, this isn't fun for me, right? And my life without you is fun. So why would I engage in something that makes me feel worse? Right. You know, and I think that's a piece of it as well. So I'm curious to see. Maybe we'll have to do a Bridgerton part 2. Yeah. To your point, if Shonda redeems herself. But I think to me it was just like a good reminder, like to challenge some of these like ingrained beliefs about love and romance that I don't even think I realized that I had, right? Until like I saw this and it rubbed up against me in a way that I was like feeling some discomfort and resentment towards it. Should we pull a little card? What do the stars have to say about Bridgerton?
This is a newer deck. I've been pulling it on my Instagram, but this is a newer deck. It's Guides of the Hidden Realms Oracle.
I've seen these ones. I like the colors on them.
This is a brand new deck that just came out. Colette Baron Reed. Something I don't love. Smell those. They're very chemically. I've had them for a while. I've taken them out of the box. I've done all the things, but they just smell
kind of
bad.
stinky.
All right. Let's take a deep breath and release and set the intention that you'll receive exactly what you need from this podcast, from this card reading, and hopefully you'll have a different view on relationships in your life, how you're showing up, how other people are showing up, and what you really want. Or maybe you are so much further along in your journey than us, and you're like,
duh.
Yes, girls. Thank you. I figured that out 10 years ago, but thanks for the reminder.
We're like happy to remind.
And if you're that person, reach out, because we might want to have you on the podcast. We got the true source of power, and it says on here, divine will, integrity, and power versus force. As we're thinking about this podcast, like I said, this is a newer deck for me, so I don't know the meanings of all the cards, but just in looking at it, she's got like a little dragon coming out of her head. She's got like fire coming out of her head, but she looks very happy and content. And I think that, you know, when we're thinking about this in relationships, reminding ourselves that we are our own true source of power, and our power doesn't lie in someone else. And we shouldn't be giving our power to other people that we're in relationship with, or that we want to be in relationship with. Because, you know, as you were talking about this fictional character, but like often we find this in non-fictional characters in our life, you give away all of your power in order to follow along with someone else, to have a relationship that maybe doesn't serve you. And it's time to go ahead and reclaim that and know that you're your own true source of power. And no matter what happens around you, or who's around you, or who you're in relationship with, your source of power comes from you.
Right.
And only you.
Right.
You know, and you can support other people, you can help other people, but they need to also have their own source of power within them.
And the person that's the right person for you in the moment is never going to they're going to like you because of your power, because you're holding on to it. Yeah. That's what's going to bring them in.
Changing the narrative and recognizing when you've set the boundary, when you've done the work, and the people show up again, right? Instead of being like, oh, they're here and I've done the work. Say, I did the work. I did the work so fucking much that other people could see it. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful that I'm in this place in my life where I am my own true sense of power. Yep. And I am not bringing you with me.
I'm not letting you take it.
No.
Again.
No. I'm going to stand here and be my own true source of power, and hopefully inspire you to be your own.
That's it.
Yep.
There she is. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Guided by Third Wheel, the podcast. We would be honored if you would like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, be well.